Thank you very much, Dr. Campbell, General Secretary. Greetings to my colleagues who are here this morning, Dr. Maurice Guy, MP Fitz-Jackson, Senator Peter Bunting. I will be making a presentation on the issue of crime and violence, and MP Fitz-Jackson will be making a presentation on the issue of fees for banking transactions. Dr. Guy and Senator Bunting are here to answer questions when we have the Q&A after the presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, those who are present online, the prolonged use of states of emergency in parts of the country from 2017 to 2020 was ineffective, and the initial positive relief that it brought to the hopes of the people was, over time, reduced to disappointment and frustration as they witnessed the shifting of violent murders to other parts of the country, like the squeezing of a balloon, without any meaningful reduction of murders at the national level. Several thousand young men were detained for extended periods without being charged, some of them for over a year. Many of them lost their jobs, creating hardships for their families and blighting their prospects in life. Very few guns were recovered. Very few of the thousands of detainees were ever charged for serious offenses. The criminal gangs remained intact, simply moving to areas where the security forces were absent. No sustained benefits to our society in terms of long-term reductions in the rates of violent crime were achieved by the states of emergency. The visible signs of the ineffectiveness and futility of the SOEs, with stationary manned checkpoints that seemed quite useless in combating crime happening close nearby, coupled with the poor working conditions of the police in particular in the SOE areas, meant that national support for the SOEs fell dramatically to below 50%, as established in credible polls. In 2019, the opposition obtained a legal opinion from one of the most senior and respected Queen's Counsels in Jamaica, who advised that the Constitution does not permit the use of states of emergency as a policing tool over a sustained period of time to tackle Jamaica's long-standing crime problem. In 2020, a Supreme Court judge on a habeas corpus application, that is, an application brought by somebody who is in detention for the court to give them their liberty if they are not charged. The Supreme Court judge ordered the release of a number of men who had been detained for several months without charge under the SOE. In his lengthy written judgment in that case, the Supreme Court judge was quite clear in articulating that certain specific provisions in the regulations which governed the SOE at the time violated the Constitution, as well as questioning the use of states of emergency as part of the toolkit for ongoing law enforcement. In November 2021, after a break for over a year, including the general elections of 2020, the government declared states of emergency in parts of Western Jamaica and the southern belt of the corporate area. However, within the first 14-day period of those SOEs, murders continued unabated, including in the states of emergency areas themselves. Prior to those November 2021 SOEs, the government had amended the Emergency Powers Act and also amended the regulations for the November 2021 SOEs so that they were in a different form from the regulations that had been used for the SOEs between 2017 and 2020. I therefore obtained another legal opinion on the new SOE regulations, again from the same senior and respected Queen's Counsel, whose advice is that the new regulations for the November 2021 state of emergency violate the Constitution in a number of important respects. In keeping with our view that the states of emergency are not an effective mechanism for fighting crime, and that the constitutionality of such use of states of emergency remains in serious doubt, and our belief that there are other lawful strategies that can and should be deployed to get crime under control, we did not support the extension of the November 2021 SOEs beyond their initial 14-day period. Our action in Parliament was in keeping with our oaths to uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of Jamaica. The legal opinion on the November 2021 SOE regulations has been shared with the private sector organization of Jamaica and with the Minister of National Security. My understanding is that the SOE regulations are to be reviewed by the new Attorney General in light of the serious issues affecting their constitutionality that have been raised in that legal opinion. But the state of emergency regulations are one thing. The bigger issue is whether the state of emergency can lawfully be used in the manner that the government has been employing since 2017 as their main ongoing strategy for tackling Jamaica's crime problem. The Constitutional Court in December 2021 heard a case brought by someone who had been detained for an extended period without charge in St. James under the SOE there. That case has squarely put the issue of the constitutionality of this use of states of emergency before the Constitutional Court for determination. We await the judgment of the court to provide guidance on this most important matter. And if I may, respectfully, I would like to urge the judiciary to try and expedite the delivery of judgment in that case so that we can get clarity on this critical issue that the nation needs clarity on. In the meantime, we urge the government to use the zones of special operations legislation far more extensively. The ZOZO has bipartisan support and provides a tool by which the military can join the police in securing communities that are torn with internal violence and are out of control. When a ZOZO is declared, the JDF personnel have full policing powers within the area of the ZOZO, and law enforcement in that area is under the joint command of the JDF and the JCF. We believe that the government's conception of the use of ZOZOs is far too narrow and limited. They have only used it in 7 small communities since 2017 when the legislation was passed. We believe that the ZOZO is to be viewed as a lawful alternative to the states of emergency, the main difference being that extended detention without charge is not permissible, and citizens do not lose their basic constitutional rights of access to the court to protect their liberty. There are also other critical pieces of crime-fighting legislation, such as the Enhanced Security Measures Act and a new Firearms Act, which the government committed to delivering on a timely basis as part of the consensus agreement which established CMOC, the Crime Oversight and Monitoring Committee, which is a bipartisan committee on which civil society is also represented. The government has been tardy and negligent, failing to meet the stated deadlines for this important legislation, which should already be in place, but has not even reached Parliament. The government needs to get its act together and bring those bills to Parliament immediately. More fundamentally, the government's approach to national security is unbalanced and has led Jamaica to becoming an increasingly violent and dangerous place. Generally speaking, Jamaica needs to tackle the deep inequalities in our society, investing in repairing the most egregious manifestations of that inequality if we are to achieve sustained improvements in our national security situation. There is no other way forward. The government's approach to national security completely ignores this reality. Crime prevention programs, critical ones like the Peace Management Initiative and Unite for Change, have been defunded or abandoned altogether with no effective replacement. This has been a deliberate policy of the government. Community action to prevent disputes from escalating into a series of reprisals must be a critical part of violence reduction strategy in Jamaica, but this has been ignored by the government. The HOPE program, which they promised to deliver and which seemed to promise much, has delivered very little and has now all but disappeared. Jamaica needs a national, well-funded, well-designed, holistic program to give the hundreds of thousands of youths who have been failed by our school system, to give them a chance to become productive citizens through mentoring, skills training, and life coaching. The education system, which is in crisis and is failing a substantial percentage of the children who go through it, needs transformation, especially at the early childhood and primary levels, so that all Jamaican children who move into secondary school can already read, write, and do basic arithmetic proficiently. There is no reason why our children should not be able to achieve that. They are bright, talented, and capable, but the system is failing far too many of them. The additional resources that have become available to the government because of the success of Jamaica's fiscal reforms over the last 8 or so years have been skewed heavily towards providing ships, aircraft, and other expensive capital equipment to the military. As needed as those things are, the police force, which has primary responsibility for law enforcement and fighting crime in our violent, torn society, has been deprived of critical resources to improve their operating capacity and effectiveness. The JCF has been operating with substantially less police officers than its established complement allows. Only yesterday, the Commissioner of Police stated that the force needs an additional 6,000 officers. The government's disdainful treatment of the police's long-standing claim for overtime pay has upset and demotivated rank-and-file police officers, whatever certain people would like to say about it. That is the reality. Instead of resolving that issue through good faith and respectful negotiations, that matter is at a stalemate, and the case that was filed by the police is heading to court instead of heading to the negotiating table for resolution. At a time when the country is in fear, as the daily death toll from violence is out of control, it is a travesty that this dispute remains a source of discontent and disaffection within the force, and the blame for that lies squarely at the feet of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Jamaicans, this government has totally mismanaged the national security of our country. Jamaica has witnessed a 10% increase in murders in 2021 and a 19% increase in murders over the first 3 or so weeks of 2022, with 112 people being killed in just 23 days. Jamaica cannot go on like this. There must be accountability for such poor performance in the critical area of our national security. Dr. Horace Chang's tenure as Minister of National Security has been an abject failure, leaving Jamaicans feeling frightened, hopeless, and in despair. he clearly cannot bring the vision, energy, and vigor and communication skills which that portfolio requires. We are therefore calling on the Prime Minister to relieve him of his duties in that portfolio and give someone else an opportunity to bring a fresh and hopefully more effective approach. Commissioner of Police, Anthony Anderson, is also hereby being put on warning. He is the main architect and promoter of the government's state of emergency strategy as an ongoing policing tool. No other commissioner of police before him has followed that unprecedented and what we regard as a dangerous path, abrogating the most basic and hard-won rights of Jamaicans in the name of ordinary policing. The constitutionality of his use of the state of emergency is in serious doubt. As I have already shown, there are other tools in the toolbox for him to use, and some others that the government needs to quickly deal with and address to provide him with, which should have been legislated for already. If the commissioner cannot find another strategic approach to getting the crime problem under control within the next 60 days, I think he must call it a day as well and allow someone else to take up the mantle of commissioner. Thank you.